Hey guys, Jehuty here with another Tekken 7 video, and today for you I've compiled my top 5 tips on how to get out of orange ranks. Of course, this information builds on one another, so if you haven't already watched my video on how to get out of yellow ranks and green ranks respectively. And yeah, the thing about orange ranks is that a lot of people get stuck here, not necessarily because they're bad players or that they're not improving, but the fact is they're actually facing, for the most part, more experienced opponents. So what happens is that people in red ranks and even purple ranks decide to start new characters, and that's why it's kinda difficult in orange ranks. Anyways, look into the description to find the timestamps you want to skip to in case you're watching this for a second time, and without further ado, let's get into it. So the first tip pertains to sidestepping and sidewalking. The thing with these is that they can get you out of some really tricky situations, and later on you will actually even welcome some of those obnoxious moves which were annoying you, because you could just sidestep them or sidewalk them and then launch punish your opponent, so it works to your advantage. So now let's just quickly cover our bases, and the thing is, you can tap once up to sidestep into the background, you can tap once down to sidestep into the foreground. If you want to sidewalk, you can tap once up and then press it again and hold it to sidewalk into the background. And of course, if you want to sidewalk into the foreground, you tap down once and then you press it again and hold it to sidewalk into the foreground. So when people are talking about stepping certain moves, they're actually also including sidewalking, especially when you're just starting off, moving into the background and into the foreground. I recommend using sidewalking more, because sidestep needs to be more deliberate and more precise. The other thing I would also like to mention here is that there's a weak side to every character, so a side to which most of their moves, but not all of them, track less to. So what you can do is you can just Google Tekken 7 sidestep. This is the version I use, it's a Steam community, and the thing here is that this is a rough outline, so that you know which direction you should be stepping your opponents. It doesn't mean that all moves work in that way, it just means that you know the direction which you want to sidestep your opponent to. I have a full-blown guide on sidewalking and sidestepping, as well as another video on sidestep blocking, so in case if you want answers to why you're getting hit whilst you're trying to sidestep, maybe there's more information in there for you. For now, there's special mention also goes to Hwoarang. In his default stance, you want to sidestep him or sidewalk him to your left. However, depending on his stance which he's in, all you need to look at is which side his stomach is facing, and that's the direction you want to step in. Anyways, sidestepping is something you shouldn't underestimate, because it can help you get out of certain mix-ups entirely. And the other thing you should also take away is that knowing it is not good enough. You need to actually practice it repeatedly so that you get better at it. So gimmicks. This is a two-way affair, because for one, if you can identify the kind of gimmicks your opponent likes to use, you can actually punish him pretty hard for some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is really risky. On the other hand, if you are over-relying on some of these stuff yourself, please reconsider. I know that certain characters with certain gimmicks and certain flowcharts can carry you quite far, but as I mentioned in the intro, you're actually facing more experienced players in form of red ranks and purple ranks players that have started a new character and are also in orange ranks. So what do I mean by gimmicks? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the tool set of a lab character like Xiaoyu or Eddie, but it's just certain things you can utilize and abuse because people don't know how to deal with it. So the first thing which comes to mind is Snake Edge, but you know, at this point a lot of people are actually blocking Snake Edge unless you have the very deceptive looking Snake Edge like Anna's one, or you have those ones which come out through the hands, because the animation also looks a bit deceptive, so a lot of people don't actually punish them, so you get away with them. So apart from that, we have random hop kicks. There are a few characters that have a kind of strange animation for their hop kick, so it takes time for you to get used to it. So what happens is that these people like to abuse that and then they go unpunished for it. Apart from that, you also have random whilst waking up launchers, because the character has a bit of evasion built into it, so people like to do this stuff. All of these stuff, if you're doing them, please stop. If your opponent uses them, just anticipate it and then make sure to punish them for it. Other stuff are launchers that you think are safe because they have a recovery animation which looks like that, but in reality they're actually launch punishable. It can also be a down forward 2. So the rule with down forward 2 is that they're mostly safe. However, certain characters actually have a quite punishable down forward 2, but people abuse these nonetheless because a lot of people are under the perception that they can't punish them. Watch out for frame traps as well, because in a lot of cases it looks like the move is even punishable, but in reality you are in minus. So when you try to retaliate, the other move comes out. So when you get hit by this the first time, look out for it so that it doesn't happen a second time. And of course, the biggest one is moves with pushback. I already mentioned this in the yellow ranks video. People still do this in orange ranks, so please look at the yellow ranks video again to get a good sense of dealing with these moves with pushback. So I've taken the model of 4 playstyles. Of course, certain characters have more of a tendency towards certain playstyles, but it's important that you understand that all characters can be played in any of the 4 styles. So instead of looking at things as character archetypes, you're trying to get a grasp on the type of player your opponent is. So it would be better to think of them as aspects of the game that combined to make a playstyle rather than playstyles on their own. So first off is Rushdown. So the Rushdown playstyle means that you're constantly assaulting your opponent by being in their face all the time, always either mixing them up or using plus frame moves to extend into other strings or mix-up situations. It also means an oppressive Okizeme game, meaning their opponent is scared to stay on the ground, thus getting up quickly and is in their blender again. In a nutshell, it's always their turn and the opponent is being constantly forced to make a quick decision. To deal with these guys, matchup knowledge is key here, as well as backdashing and stepping, ducking highs, and also using low jabs to interrupt their momentum. Typical characters you'd find using this kind of playstyle are Hwoarang, Nina, Ana, Julia, Miguel, Leo, Fakum Ram, but it can also be Heihachi or even Kazuya given enough momentum. So the second style is the Turtle playstyle. The approach of turtling emphasizes heavy defense with little or no offense. They're reluctant to throw out moves, thus you won't be counter-hitting them because they mostly don't press buttons. In many cases, they'll wait for an unsafe move or a high, then punish you for it. Don't assault these guys needlessly. Approach with safe moves or low pokes, as well as throws to open them up. Poking just means using fast and safe moves in any context. So typical turtle characters you can see are, for instance, Jack, but Kazumi to a certain degree also fits in there, and Brian also to a certain degree fits in there, or even Alyssa, or even Law and Paul if they're played in that specific way. So now we have 2 baiting playstyles. The first one is whiff baiting. So the whiff baiting playstyle, here you poke defensively like with Alyssa or Jack or Kazumi, but your goal isn't consistent damage over time. Instead, you backdash to bait out whiffs after poking instead of continued pressure. Sometimes they also utilize rushdown tactics for pressure in order to make the opponent want to retaliate, then once again backdash and launch them. Characters over here, of course, as I mentioned, Kazumi, Jack, and so forth, but also Mishimas, so Devil Jin, Jin, even Kazuya and Heihachi. And yeah, my main is also in there, Lee. So next up is the counter hit baiting playstyle. So here what happens is, unlike whiff baiting, you set up a situation where the opponent is counter hit for either a follow-up or a launcher. Approaching these guys can be very dangerous because they mostly have good keep out tools. These guys like to use frame traps as well to get you to retaliate, and then of course you get counter hit. If you've been caught up a couple of times by them, then you're reluctant to retaliate, and then after that they can just either poke you or mix you up. So dealing with these guys, you want to make sure you aren't too close to them. You can then also use quick pokes, and you can actually also use whiff baiting yourself to your advantage. Characters which like to use this kind of playstyle are like Steve, Armor King, because they have like very quick counter hit tools which come out of nowhere, but it can also be somebody like Lee, or any character at all that has a magic 4. What's important here is that you don't forget that these 4 playstyles aren't mutually exclusive, and opponents can incorporate different aspects of them into their playstyles. Also take note when your opponent makes bigger changes by leaning more into one or the other playstyle. So let's talk about ducking highs. In theory, everybody knows that you can duck highs. However, in the heat of battle, it's not always clear to you what is a high and what is a mid. And then the other thing entirely is to actually be able to react to them and punish appropriately. So in these ranks, a whole lot of people like to use strings that end with highs, because of course the reason is highs are mostly safe on block. Some of them are even plus on block. However, if you of course can identify this and use this to your advantage, it actually becomes a big risk for them to throw out these moves. The thing about ducking highs is that you can actually even neutralize certain mix-up situations entirely. We also quickly have to talk about whiff recovery, because the thing is, some of these highs on whiff recover really fast. So what I mean by that, for instance, let's take the electric here. If you want to launch punish this, you have to be really on point. It means that you have to really duck, and as soon as you duck and the move comes over your head, that you actually launch punish it, or else you won't be able to launch punish it. There are other moves, but they're few, which also have very quick recovery, and then in that case you wouldn't even be able to launch punish them. You actually have to go for maybe something smaller like a 10 or 11 frame while rising punish. So when starting off with ducking highs, you want to start off of course with strings, because the first move telegraphs the next move, so you should be able to later on duck the highs consistently. So I've divided them into 3 different categories, 3 different types, and the first one is the one you're seeing in the background here. These are mids that go into highs, or highs that go into highs. And a lot of these you've actually seen them a lot, but because you're not ducking them, people keep spamming them and they feel kind of oppressive. So look at these, and then maybe you'd also want to look specifically into this portion of the video again to memorize some of these strings, because it's really, people are getting away with murder. So the second type of move string that ends with a high are the low highs, but these ones in specific, they're the most dangerous ones, because what's here is that even if you get hit by the low, you can still duck the high and launch punish. So these things are really risky, but a lot of people don't know about this, and that's why people get away with murder. Don't allow this to be you. Make sure you watch and internalize some of these, and then make sure you punish people properly off of them. So the last category is similar to the previous one. The only difference is that they're low high strings that are natural combos. Means that when the low connects, the high is guaranteed. These are really problematic, and there are only really 2 ways to deal with them. One is you have a hard read, so you actually duck and block the low and stay ducked and wait for the high, and then you punish. And then the other one which you have at your disposal is you bait it out. So you use backdashing, you create space, you let the low whiff, and then you duck the high. So yeah, that about does it. Let's get on to my last tip for orange ranks. So the last point somewhat goes without saying, and that is you need to come back to practice mode again and again and again. And the thing is, all the things which you've learned up till now, the things for green ranks, yellow ranks, and now orange ranks, you need to practice them to get good at them. And especially given the fact that in orange ranks, a lot of the opponents which you're facing are actually, as I mentioned, red ranks and purple ranks players who have started a new character. You really need to come back to practice mode. I know some certain people at a certain point would be like, well, I'll just practice with live matches and get experience from that and learn the matchups through there, yeah, that in itself is very good as well. But there are a lot of things you can just cut short by actually going back to practice mode and just figuring it out over there quickly. And yeah, the other thing about practice mode is that in many cases we just go there to like quickly do a couple of combos for 5 to 10 minutes and then we get out again. We should also of course be learning certain matchups, and we should be utilizing the record feature to record those moves and then of course learn how to deal with them. It's good if you record like 2 or 3 moves at a time because that helps you and keeps you on your feet. You also have restart options at your fingertips, so for instance in the restart tab, if you want to practice your wall combos, you can reset it in a way that you're always at the wall, or you can also switch positions with your opponent so your back is to the wall and then also practice pressure situations out of that. You can also reset certain things like floor breaks and balcony breaks by going of course into the restart settings, and over there you select default, restore gimmicks to default. I know it's worded poorly, but yeah, that's what resets that, so you don't always have to reload the stage. You can do other stuff as well, like learning frames if you own the frame data DLC, practice your throw breaks. You can even simulate 3-bar online connections if you want to practice that. Anyway, that brings me to the end of my video on how to get out of orange ranks. This is most likely also going to be my last guide in regard to the ranks, because as I mentioned, you also need this knowledge to face up against people in red and purple ranks. And yeah, I think in itself that covers it. I mean, if you like the video, leave a like. Of course, consider sharing and subscribing because that really helps me the most. Look into the channel because there are a ton of other guides over there. And don't worry, I will still be doing guides. This is not the last guide, that's for sure. Anyway, this is your boy Jehuty, and I'll see you on the next one.